Alright students, welcome to the first video in the fourth week of IT 145. I'm David Bright, your instructor, and I just thought I'd start making these videos to make these things a little bit clearer. What I'm planning to do in this video is walk you through a lot of the basics of assignment 4.4, show you some of the sticking points, and actually I'll also talk about some of the steps I'd like to see you take when you're completing one of these assignments. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. What you see in front of you here is obviously the JGrasp screen. I've already started the assignment by creating a class, a public class assignment 4.4. You notice what we have here is a comment header. A lot of times you guys see me, have seen comments where I ask you for a comment header. This is what I'm looking for. It's basically a comment block, right? We start with right, a multi-line comment like so, right? And you're going to add your name of the assignment, your name, the purpose of the assignment, and the date. Actually, you're going to, you're going to put in the real date. Actually, whatever date you start working, or you want to put in the completion date or the date the assignment's actually due. Either way, I'm usually fine with putting in the date that you started it, at least if I started it early. Okay, there you go. Also, we do public class assignment, public class, the name of your class, and you obviously have to save the Java file with the same name. And we have our main function, our main method. Okay. Within the main method, you notice I have a block of comments here. It's useful to actually help to structure the program, and I recommend that you do this. It helps to clarify your thoughts. And when I ask you guys for comments beforehand, it's usually better to do this instead of trying to add them afterwards, because this way you pretty much know what you want your program to do, and it kind of helps you to structure what you're going to do in the program itself. So we're going to start out by we're going to declare some variables. What these variables are, we don't know yet, but I know I want to do that, right? I also want to prompt the user for an integer because it's part of the assignment. So something I want to do. I want to store the integer in some sort of data structure, right? So once we get the integer in, we want to store it in something. I don't know what that is yet, but we want to store it in something, right? Maybe an int, maybe a float. Well, it is an int, maybe a float, maybe a string. We'll talk about that in a bit. I want to loop through the data structure as long as there are more digits. So at this point, we're going to be looping through something, all right? Inside of the loop, we want to retrieve the individual digits of the integer. So once we have the integer, we're going to retrieve the individual digits. We're going to display the digit. We're going to add the digit to a sum. And once there are no more digits in the integer, we're going to display the integer finally. All right? So that's pretty much the steps. So let's see what we want to do. Let's take this. Let's just jump in and see what we know how to do. Prompt the user for an integer. I know how to do that, right? That's easy. System.out.println. Right? Give me an integer, right? Now. Okay? Whatever. Okay? We're going to prompt the user for a number. It's important that you always prompt the user to let them know what you're expecting. Just presenting the user with a blank page, a blank space doesn't help them. They have no idea what they're supposed to enter. So this is always really important to prompt the user. Okay, and we want to store the integer in some sort of data structure, huh? Well, could do an int, right? Let's try that. Int num. All right, and we could do, oh, we forgot a step here, right? Forgot to retrieve the user input. Forgot to do that. All right, and to do that, we have the scanner object. So let's walk through that a little bit. Okay, normally you have something like this. Static scanner console equals new scanner. All right, system.in. Let's walk through this a little bit. People have asked, what does this mean exactly? We're going to hold off on the static keyword for a little bit, but for right now we have scanner console equals new scanner. What we're actually doing is scanner is a data type. The same way int is a data type, or string or double is a data type. A particular type of data type called a class. In this case, it's a scanner class. So we're creating a scanner class. Unlike normal data types, right? Normal data types like an int or float or double have a certain amount of memory associated with them, right? An int is 32 bits. A float is 32 bits. This is actual memory, right? This is actually real memory inside the computer. There's like a hunk of memory inside the computer that's associated with this int, okay? And we're pointing to that memory using this num. Variable num actually is just sort of like naming a box of memory. Num, all right? That's a size integer. Here we have a box of memory called console that's of size scanner. It's a type scanner. But whenever you create a class, you actually have to create the memory using the new keyword. This actually creates the actual memory and heap that you're pointing to. You're actually pointing to this using the console, using the name, okay, of the class that you named it, and you're actually pointing to that memory with this new keyword and this scanner. So it's actually creating a big chunk of memory inside the computer that has all the methods and variables inside the scanner class. So that's actually what this is doing here. Don't worry about system.in for now, just think about that. This is actually called a reference variable, okay? And this is a constructor, to get a bit technical. So any of you guys are asking about, that's what we have. So let's move on. We have this console. Let's just use this because it's the easiest way to do this. We're going to have console, since we have integer dot next int, right? And we can do this. Okay? So now we have this number stored in an integer. And this is a very bad thing. In order to retrieve the individual digits from an integer, you have a lot of problems. What if this integer is something like, we get the number in like 1,567, or the person can put the number in 56, or the person can put in number 1, right? There's no limit to the size. Well, there is a limit, but they could put in any size number. We're not exactly sure how large that number is. There's steps we can take to figure out the size of the number. There's steps we can figure out to figure out what these actual digits are using an int, but it actually sucks a lot. I mean, it's a terrible, horrible thing to go through. It is. It's just not a good thing. It's a horrible, grinding, awful experience. It's sort of like the Taylor Swift music of Java programming. So anyway, let's move on. Instead of doing that, let's think about data structure. We want a data structure that we can get components from, a data structure that we know has components, all right, that we can easily access individual components of that data type, that data structure. And the data type we have that we know does that is actually the string data type. Using a string makes this assignment a lot easier. String num, right? And instead of doing an int, we're just going to do next, which will get us a string, okay? Makes this a lot easier. It's much easier to use a string because we can actually, it's a class, and there are actually a lot of methods inside the string class to access individual elements of the string itself, okay? So here we've retrieved the user input, and we've stored the integer in some sort of a data structure, okay? In this case, the data structure is a string, right? Because life is just too dang short to deal with integer parsing, which is what we're doing, right? Yeah. So we're going to store the integer in a string just to make things easier, okay? All right. So that's pretty good. So we want to loop through the data structure to get more digits, as long as there are more digits. Well, how do you loop? That's a good question. Well, let's go and take a look at the string data type, okay? So I'm going to go into Safari because I'm on a Mac because that's just how I roll. I'm wild like that. Actually, I have the world's slowest Mac. This is actually a Mac from 1964. All right. Just go to Google. And sometime in the next year, you guys have any Russian novels you want to read? Now's the time. You want to write a Russian novel? It'd be good right now. Yes, sir. Any large religious text you guys want to go through? Quran, Bible? So I'm in sunny Chicago, teaching from the Midwest. This is actually my first term teaching here. So you guys are my first class. So far it's been interesting. So yeah, really appreciate it. And you know, you guys have actually given me a lot to think about just as far as teaching. So anyway, here we are. We're finally into Google. You know, put down that Russian novel. Let's go on to do a little search. So we're going to do Java string class, right? And let's take a look at it. So there are things we have, right? If you look at this Java string, okay, string ABC, okay, we can do that. There's some cool things we can do with that. abc.substring here, 2, 3 is actually very cool. If we did that, we would get the letter C. Okay, actually, if we did a system.out here, it would actually show the letter C. Okay, so that's a cool thing about the string data type. This class gives you just a crap load of methods here to actually access individual elements of the string. And then when there's things like last index of, char at, which gives you the character to specified index. You'd think you'd want to use that, but we're going to look at, it's a lot harder to actually convert a char to an int. Well, it's not harder actually, it's just more math than you guys probably want thrown at you, and I won't do that to you anymore. So we have a length that's actually going to return the length of a string, and that could be very useful. Okay, a lot of other things. The two we're interested in is length, to get us the length of the string, and we're also going to look at substring with beginning index and ending index. Okay, as we saw in this example, okay, this is the start of where we want to start parsing the string. This is the end of it, and actually that's going to get us the C from this example. So this is something we're interested in. So let's take a look at those two methods of the string class and see what we get here. All right. So we have right now the integer stored in this number string. It seems counterintuitive, but it works. We're actually going to store this integer in a string, and we're going to walk through it. All right. So let's go ahead and use the for loop. I'm assuming you guys have seen it. If you haven't, I'm going to do it. I'm introduce it to you now because, well, it makes things easier. There are several kinds of loops that we've looked at. We've looked at the while loop, all right, which actually while in some variable, while some condition is met, right, we're going to run the code inside of this loop. So while this evaluates to true, we're going to run this code, okay, while true. All right. We saw the do while loop, do yada yada yada, while some condition inside of here, right, which is pretty much the same as the while loop, okay, except the do while loop was guaranteed to run at least once. The while loop, you can actually have a condition that is false, and we can leave the loop immediately. Okay, the loop we're going to use in this particular assignment, well, I'm going to use anyway, is the for loop. Okay, for loop is interesting. You have an initialization, right? Usually something like this. This is a counter-controlled loop. The the for loop is a counter-controlled loop. And I here is the counter. So this first part of the statement initializes the counter. Okay? So one, we initialize the counter. Okay. Then two, we have our condition. So as long as I is less than something, right? So this is our test. I is less than 10, for instance, right? As long as I is less than 10, for instance, we're going to run this loop. And then we have our increment or decrement, right? In this case, we're going to do I plus plus, which is adding 1 to I. So if you haven't seen it, you should have seen it in the first week in IT 145, right? Plus plus, right? Minus minus is equivalent to, like if we do, hold on, I plus plus is actually equivalent to I plus I equals I, hold on, I plus 1, right? I minus minus is actually equivalent to I equals I minus 1, okay? All right, okay. So far we have our initialization for the counter, okay? We have the test condition for the counter, and we're going to increment or decrement the counter, okay? Right now I picked the random value 10, but actually what we want is actually the length of the string. And what we mean by length is how many characters, okay, are inside of this string. In this case, if we did abc.length, we would get a 3, okay? Did cde.length, okay, we get a 3 again, okay? If we did, you get the idea, right? So we have this string method called .length. That will return the length of a string. And we have a string here, num string, that actually holds our integer. So let's do this. Num string dot length. Right? So as long as I is less than the length of the string, we're going to increment I. So that's the loop. Okay? Great. Okay. Come on. All right, so let's take all this. Let's do this. And drop this inside of our loop. Indentation is your friend. Really large programs, this gets very confusing. After a while, you kind of lose what curly brace means what and where it is. It's really confusing. So indentation is an important thing to do. So let's retrieve the individual digits of the integer. How do we do that? Let's go back to Google. A friend of mine once said, coworker, that 65% of development is Google. And it's true. Looking stuff up, I mean, it's invaluable. So really, the internet is your friend. But there's a difference between actually researching how things are done, right, and just swiping code. Here we're researching what a string class does, right? We're researching the elements of a string class, what we can use it for, what we can do with it, and it makes it a lot easier. And I don't mind you guys doing this. What I do mind is just copying an assignment that has absolutely nothing to do, especially when it has nothing to do with what we're doing or is only tangentially related to the work we're doing in the class or the assignment. And then you try to submit that as your own work. That's a problem. But anyway, let's move on with this. Right, substring. Okay. So substring returns a new string that's substring this string. Begins to specify begin index and extends to the character at end index -1, which is pretty useful. So if we could go from The length of the string is going to be begin index to end index. So if we go from the beginning of the string to the end of the string, right, just display every element of it, would be good. So hamburger.substring returns urge. Okay, so that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. You notice you start counting at 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 5, 6, 7, right? So 4 to 8 returns urge because it's end index minus 1. So it's going to actually go from 4 to 7, which is there. Okay? Which is cool. Same thing here. We go 1, which is the M. 0 would be S. 1 is M. Right? To E. Okay? So it's really important to remember this ending thing is the index. It's its position. And then when I say index, I mean a position within the string. Okay, that's what they mean by index. Okay, so substrings can be pretty useful for us. So let's go ahead and do this. In order to do that, though, we need something to store it in. Let's start with this. We got num string dot sub string something. Okay. Well, we need something to store it in. Since this thing returns, what does it return? It returns a string. So let's put that up here. We got string, digit, string. Let's put the rest of these integers here. The rest of the variables we know we're going to need. We're going to need an int num. When we convert this string to a num, we want int sum that we're going to display. Okay? Let's initialize sum to 0 because you know we're going to need that. I'll talk about that soon, but for right now, let's just keep going. So we're going to change, we're going to store the string that we retrieve from substring in digit. String equals num string, right? And then, great. Okay, so we got digit string equals num string dot substring. So this is going to take whatever integer, right, they passed in here. We're storing that integer in a string. We're going to loop through. We're going to repeat this loop for the length of the string for every character that's in the string. And we're going to do a substring from somewhere to somewhere and store it in digit string. So where do we want to go? I mean, what do we want to, how do we want to walk through this, right? We want to start at 0, because that's the beginning of the string. And then we eventually want to end at whatever the length is, right? But every digit we want is actually a length of 1, right? So we start at 0, we want to go from 0 to 1. We start at 1 with the M, we want to go from 1 to 2. We start at I, we want to go from 2 to 3. We start at L, we want to go to 3 to 4. We start at E, we want to go to 4 to 5. Kind of see a pattern here? We begin with whatever digit we start with, 1. We go to 0, for instance, and we take the immediate next character, right? We substring to the immediate next character to get the value stored in num string. So we can do 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3. This is what we'd like. We'd like this number, first number here, to change, and this next number to be this number plus 1. Well, what number do we have, what counter do we have that changes inside of this loop? I is going to change inside of this loop. So we're going to put I here and do I plus 1. So when I is 0, then next we're going to go from 0 to I plus 1, which is 1. When I is 1, we're going to go from 1 to 1 plus 1, which is 2. So this is an easy way to walk through this string, retrieve the digits, and store it in this digit string. Okay, we need to now convert the digit string to an integer. Okay, we know how to do that, right? That's pretty easy. We're going to have num equals, what do we have? We have the wrapper class. You guys remember this? Integer dot, anybody? Anybody? Bueller? That's right. We got parse int. Okay, so this wrapper class has a method, parse int, which actually parses a string or converts a string. It actually interprets a string. When we say parse, we mean interprets a string, right? And it's going to interpret it as an integer and store it in num. Okay, we're going to display the digit. So system.out.print line. Okay. Right. And we're going to display num. And then we're going to add the digit to a sum. Oh boy. It's really weird. All of a sudden, I've suddenly forgotten how to program. Jeez. Well, we need to do something here. I don't know what it is. We need to do something here. Probably involving some, probably something to do with that. All right. Well, let's forget that because I've suddenly forgotten how to program, but let's move on. That's weird. Alzheimer's sucks, I tell you. And I'm so young.